Alright, so for this part, we are going to go over the store procedures I've created. A majority of the store procedures I've created are used in the Power BI report, but there are a couple of them that I don't use, and their purpose was for me just to try new things out or create different store procedures. So we're going to go through each and every one of them. Some of them will take less time to explain, but this section shouldn't be too long. Okay, so for the first store procedure called all stock raw data, this store procedure is basically a select all statement coming from our overall stock table. As of recording this video, that table has around 700,000 rows. So that is a lot of data coming from one query. And especially since we're running it as a store procedure, it's going to take a little bit longer than having a regular select all query. You can also see we have a variable or parameter set up to where we could put in a certain stock symbol, and it's going to retrieve all the days that stock symbol was traded. In this example, we have the stock symbol of DFS, and that stands for Discover Financial Services. So this table has 3,400 rows, and it's going to give you all the rows that Discover traded. So the next example we'll take a look at is Tesla. But on a quick side note, I do want to mention that these store procedures are not going to be too complex. And for the more complex one, we're going to go behind the store procedures to see the coding for it. And as I mentioned earlier, this store procedure here is basically using a select all statement where the stock finder is equal to the stock symbol in our overall stock raw data table. So you can see that when we put in a parameter for the stock finder, that the store procedure actually runs pretty quickly, ranging from anywhere between 2 to 5 seconds. But you can see here in this example that we are running that store procedure now without the parameter, and we have already reached over 20 seconds on this store procedure. So as I mentioned earlier, this table contains over 700,000 rows, and it's going to keep on growing as we add more stock symbols and as the day passes. Well, that's pretty much it for this store procedure. Very simple and nothing really too complex for it. The next store procedure we are going to look at is called all stock raw data 1 week. And the data is coming from the 1 week stock data table. And you can see here that the parameter you don't have to put in, just like as the last store procedure we ran. If you don't put in nothing, then it's going to return all of the stock symbol information. So for this example, we're going to go with Discover again. This store procedure doesn't take as long as the previous one, mainly because the table that we are using in the store procedure uses a lot less rows. Also, you can see that this query executes pretty fast, taking only a second. And we're going to take a look at what the data output looks like, or the data set, when we do not specify a parameter. And you can see that the store procedure runs quickly with only 14,000 rows in this data set. So it's substantially less than our previous store procedure. And this one, in the long run, or maybe logically speaking, depending on how you want to view your data, maybe at a recent period, this store procedure may be a little bit better. The next one, called all-time stock history, is not one that I really use, so we could skip over that one. That one is basically the same thing as our first store procedure, all stock raw data. With that being said, we can move on to the next store procedure, and it's called current fidelity benchmark. This one is basically an overview of the fidelity benchmark table that was scraped from Python for the current day, or for the day this table was imported from SSIS to our SQL database. So on to the next store procedure, and it is called Daily Stock Performance Query. And this store procedure is basically an overview of how each company performed in the stock market for the current day. So you can see we have the stock symbol, the stock name, the sector, sector last when it was updated, the stock close open difference, the percentage from that, and then we have the open and we have the close. So this data set is going to give you an overview of how the stock market performed in the day. Well, for the sector and for the companies that we have in our original stock symbol data list. I don't use this store procedure in any of my Power BI reports only because I did the join incorrectly, and now looking at it, it should be a full outer join instead of an inner join. And the reason for this is because not every stock symbol was found on the Fidelity website. So when we go to look at our data set, we may have those 6 to 8 stock symbols missing because the Python script was not able to find it on the Fidelity website. Let's look at this query and see what exactly it does. So the first thing we have is our select statement. We could avoid all of the coding above. This is just basically the coding that you see when you go to modify the store procedure. So the first thing we have is, of course, the stock symbol name. We have the sector coming from the Fidelity benchmark table. We have the last percent change coming from the Fidelity benchmark table as well. We are then going to perform a couple of calculations, and the first one is we are going to look at where the stock symbol closed, or excuse me, where the stock symbol opened for the day and where it closed, and we are going to get the difference between that from that. So you can see we are going to use the round function, and then we are going to take where the stock symbol closed, subtract it from where that stock symbol opened, and so that'll give us our column named stock close open difference. Not the best naming convention, but for now it is what it is. And then for our next column, we are going to take where that stock symbol closed for the day minus where it opened, multiply it by 100, and then divide it by where that stock symbol open for the day, and that is going to give us our percentage of how much that stock symbol for the day increased or decreased. So the round function is only going to show 2 decimal places. Then we move on to our from and our join section, and it's kind of self-explanatory. It's just that we're bringing multiple tables together so that we could grab and combine information as one. But I want to focus on the where statement next. So we have where stock history dot date, that is our column, is equal to the date for today. So we are going to use the convert function to convert the get date function into a date format, and it's going to only do it for the current day that the get date function returns. So in our case 1217, the output should be 1217 coming from that function. And we have another requirement, and it's where the stock open is not equal to 0. And the reason for this is because the calculations that we performed earlier, if there's a 0 in the open column, then we can't perform that last column, the percent change, because you can't divide by 0, and we get a SQL error. Moving on to the next store procedure, it is called EOD stock information, or end of day stock information. This store procedure is going to show you the rows where the company or stock symbol had data for the current day. The next store procedure I want to look at is called stock decliner. Think of this as a subset of our daily stock performance store procedure. And basically, as the name says itself, it's only going to list the companies that had a negative day in the stock market for that current day. And this store procedure is its own query. It doesn't connect to the other store procedure, which is the daily performance one that I mentioned earlier. Next up, we have stock dividends, and this, of course, is only going to list whenever a company paid out a dividend and the information behind it. This is another store procedure that is used in the Power BI report as well. And we're going to quickly take a look at this store procedure too, because there's a join I want to show you, and it's the correct join. So if we go to modify, we get what the query looks like behind the store procedure. And as you can see right off the bat, instead of using an inner join, we are going to use a full outer join. So we're going to get some values that return null for the sector and industry, but that is fine with me. I still want to see everything. And you can see we also have a where clause where the dividends column is not equal to 0. So that would mean, that would assure us that that company had to pay out a dividend for that day. So right after that store procedure, the next one we could look at is called stock gainers. And this is going to contain all the companies that gained in the stock market for that day. We have the open, the close, how much they gained in dollar value, and their percentage gain. And all of this is for the current day as well. So basically, it's going to be the same thing as the decliners. It's just that there is several columns that are not included in this store procedure. But there's not really that much of a worry there. Next up, we have the stock news search, and this is going to retrieve all of our stock symbol headlines with the article link that we pulled from the web using Python earlier. So if we take a look at the output, you can see we have our stock symbol, the headline, the link, and the date it was published. So it looks exactly like that Excel file we was dealing with earlier.